Most people believe blood sugar is controlled almost entirely by food. They think in the morning, check their fasting glucose, and see a high number before breakfast. Confusion sets in immediately. How can my blood sugar be high if I haven't eaten anything yet? For many adults over 45, this moment is deeply frustrating. They feel like they're doing everything right. They went to bed without eating late. They avoided sweets. They were careful the day before. And yet, there it is, high morning blood sugar. What most people don't realize is that this has very little to do with breakfast, and often very little to do with what they ate the day before. Spells. The real driver of morning blood sugar is something else entirely. It's one organ that quietly works through the night, out of sight, out of mind, yet controls what you see on your glucose meter the moment you wake up. That organ is the liver. Before we go deeper, if you wake up tired, struggle with fasting glucose, or often see high blood sugar before breakfast, subscribe to the channel. Everything here is focused on morning blood sugar, fasting glucose, why people wake up tired, and why high blood sugar before breakfast is so common, especially after age 45. Here's the key idea most people were never taught. Morning blood sugar is driven more by what your liver releases than by what you eat. While you sleep, your body is not resting. It is regulating. It is adjusting. It is preparing. And at the center of that preparation is the liver. Your liver stores glucose in the form of glycogen. This stored glucose is meant to be released slowly and strategically to keep your brain and vital organs functioning while you sleep. Throughout the night, the liver releases small amounts of glucose to maintain stability. As morning approaches, this release naturally increases. That's not a mistake. That's not a problem. That's normal physiology. Your body is making sure that the moment you wake up, energy is available. This is why fasting glucose often peaks in the morning. Not because of breakfast, not because of carbs, not because you failed your diet, but because your liver is doing what it was designed to do. The problem begins when this system becomes poorly coordinated, and that happens far more often with age than most people realize. As insulin sensitivity gradually declines, which is extremely common after 45, the liver doesn't always receive the signal to slow down glucose release. So instead of releasing glucose in a controlled, measured way, the liver becomes more aggressive. Glucose enters the bloodstream, but it doesn't enter the cells efficiently. Blood sugar rises. Energy does not. This is one of the most confusing experiences people have with morning blood sugar. They wake up with high fasting glucose, yet they feel exhausted, foggy, unmotivated, drained. That feels contradictory. But once you understand the liver's role, it makes perfect sense. Calorie. Energy does not come from glucose in the blood. Energy comes from glucose inside the cells. If the liver releases glucose, but insulin cannot guide that glucose into the cells properly, energy remains trapped in the bloodstream. The glucose is there, but it's not usable. And the brain doesn't ask, how much glucose is floating in the blood? The brain asks, how much energy am I actually receiving right now? When the answer is not enough, the brain responds as if energy is low. That's why people wake up tired even when blood sugar is high. The problem is not lack of fuel, it's lack of access. This misunderstanding leads many people to chase the wrong solution. They restrict food even more. They cut carbs harder. They skip breakfast. They blame sugar. But breakfast is reacting to a problem that already started overnight. The liver set the stage long before food entered the picture. That's why morning blood sugar is not a food story. It's a liver story. And once you see that, the entire pattern becomes clearer. To understand why the liver plays such a powerful role in morning blood sugar, we need to talk about something called hepatic insulin resistance. That term sounds complicated, but the idea behind it is simple. Insulin doesn't only work in muscles and fat cells. It also sends signals to the liver. One of insulin's most important jobs is to tell the liver, we have enough glucose. You can slow down. When insulin signaling is strong, the liver responds appropriately. It releases glucose when needed, and then eases off. But when insulin signaling weakens, which often happens gradually with age, the liver doesn't hear that message as clearly, so it keeps releasing glucose. This is what hepatic insulin resistance looks like in real life. You're asleep. Your liver is preparing for the morning. It begins releasing glucose. Blood sugar rises. But insulin's signal to slow that release is weaker than it used to be. So, the liver continues releasing glucose, even when there's already enough circulating. That's how fasting glucose stays high. This entire process happens before breakfast. No food is involved yet, which is why so many people feel confused, frustrated, and discouraged. They assume blood sugar must be reacting to something they ate. But the real driver was active hours earlier, while they were still sleeping. This also explains why fasting glucose can feel so stubborn. Once the liver falls into a pattern of aggressive glucose release, it doesn't shut off easily, especially in the early morning hours, when stress hormones are naturally elevated. Cortisol plays a major role here. Cortisol rises in the early morning to help you wake up. One of its jobs is to signal the liver to release glucose. That's helpful when the system is well coordinated.
But when insulin sensitivity is reduced, cortisol's signal becomes dominant. The liver hears release glucose much louder than slow down. So glucose continues flowing into the bloodstream. This is why morning blood sugar often feels harder to control than daytime numbers. During the day, meals and movement help guide glucose into cells. In the morning, before food, before movement, the liver is in charge. And if hepatic insulin resistance is present, the liver runs the show. Another detail many people miss is why this problem tends to worsen with age. As we get older, insulin signaling gradually weakens, muscle mass declines, liver fat tends to increase, stress hormones become less precise, and sleep becomes lighter and more fragmented. Each of these shifts nudges the liver toward releasing more glucose. Not because the liver is broken, but because it is responding to signals that have changed. That's why people often say, "I eat the same way I always did. I didn't have this problem before." Nothing changed. Something did change. The signals changed. And the liver is extremely sensitive to signals. This is also why food restriction alone rarely fixes morning blood sugar. You can eat less. You can avoid carbs. You can be disciplined. But if the liver is still releasing glucose aggressively in the morning, fasting glucose remains elevated. Food didn't cause the problem. Food is reacting to it. And this is where many people feel stuck. They keep adjusting meals. But the real driver is upstream, in the liver. Once you understand the liver's role, morning blood sugar stops feeling random. It stops feeling unfair. And it stops feeling like a personal failure. Because the liver is not reacting to what you eat in the morning. It is reacting to signals it received hours earlier. The morning is simply when that behavior becomes visible. Before food. Before movement. Before conscious decisions. That's why fasting glucose is such a powerful signal. It reveals how aggressively the liver released glucose overnight and into the early morning hours. This is also why people often wake up tired, even when blood sugar is high. The liver released glucose, but insulin couldn't guide it into cells efficiently. So energy stayed in the bloodstream, not in the cells where it's actually used. The result is a very specific pattern. High morning blood sugar.
Slow, usable energy. Brain fog, fatigue, reliance on stimulation. That pattern points directly back to liver-driven glucose release. When people finally understand this, something important shifts. They stop blaming breakfast. They stop blaming themselves. They stop chasing food-based solutions for a problem that started overnight. Ds. This doesn't mean food doesn't matter. It means timing matters more than food in the morning. And it means the liver sets the stage long before the first bite. This is why fixing morning blood sugar often begins with understanding how the liver behaves. 2. When liver glucose release becomes better coordinated, fasting glucose improves. Morning energy feels steadier, hunger becomes calmer, coffee cravings soften, and the entire day feels easier. Not because you forced it, but because the main driver was addressed. Morning blood sugar is not about discipline. It's about coordination. Coordination between the liver, insulin, hormones, and the nervous system. And the morning is where that coordination is tested first. If your fasting glucose is high before breakfast, your body is not betraying you. It's revealing something important. The liver is working, but it may be working too aggressively for your current insulin sensitivity. That's information, not a verdict. When you stop fighting the symptoms and start understanding the driver, control begins to return. Not through restriction, not through stress, but through clarity. If this video helped you understand why the liver is the real driver of morning blood sugar, subscribe to the channel. Every video here is focused on morning blood sugar, fasting glucose, why people wake up tired, and why high blood sugar before breakfast is so common, especially after age 45.